When you commit yourself to the Lord's will, you can expect opposition. Often when we find ourselves living for God's kingdom, the kingdom of light, the kingdom of darkness begins to make war against us. And so we need to be prepared, and we need to not be surprised when that opposition comes. Listen, if you're doing God's work, don't be surprised if it's not easy. It may not be easy, but it will be worth it. Hey there, and welcome to Growing Forward, a resource to help you keep growing between Sundays. Hey, I'm so glad that you are here. I'm really excited about today's content. If you know me, you know that I love a really good Old Testament story. And today, I want to hope to bring to life an Old Testament story that's tucked away in 2 Chronicles. And so stay tuned for that. Before we begin, though, I just want to reflect on an amazing day that we had at Antioch, Georgetown yesterday. And we had our groundbreaking ceremony out at our 12-acre property, and it was amazing. It was incredible. It was so special. It was really so surreal. And just to have that opportunity to honor some different people in our church family who really most exude our church culture and kind of who we are and what we desire to be about. I mean, it was so special. I also love that we just kind of reflected on a few passages, like when Solomon was dedicating the temple and he kind of gave this charge to the people, or Samuel when they were going up against battle, right? Kind of this moment where they really couldn't do it themselves and they had to rely on God. And Samuel took this stone and he stuck it in the ground and he called it Ebenezer, which means the Lord has brought us to this point. And so we just reflected on that. Man, how good God has been, how faithful God has been to our church over the last 7 years. And listen, these are the good old days. We're going to look back on these days with fond memories. And so listen, I don't want to miss that. I don't want to get caught up in longing for the past. I don't want to get caught up in always reaching for the future. But man, I want to live in the moment and in the opportunities that God provides for us today. Hey, now moving on to today's content, I want to share with you a story coming from 2 Chronicles chapter 31. This is a story about a king of Judah called Hezekiah, King Hezekiah. Now, just a quick background. This is after the nation of Israel has divided into two kingdoms. They have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was referred to as Israel. The southern kingdom was referred to as Judah. Now, every king in the northern tribes of Israel were wicked and evil kings. In the south, the kings of Judah, it was kind of hit and miss. Some kings were good and they followed the Lord. They desired what God desired. And some of the kings were evil. They desired what they desired and they turned away from the Lord. King Hezekiah is described as a good king, a God-fearing king. In fact, when he took the throne, he began to do away with all the idols and the Asherah poles and the pagan worship. And he began to repent and realign the nation of Judah with the ways, the commands, and the instructions of the Lord. So he was a good king. Now listen, he wasn't a perfect king. He wasn't perfect in every way. Hezekiah had his moments where he fell short, where he missed the mark, but overall, he desired to pursue the Lord. Don't take my word for it. In 2 Chronicles chapter 31, the chapter ends with kind of just a short little description about this particular king. And here's what it says about him. It says, Hezekiah did this throughout all Judah. He did what was good and upright and true before the Lord his God. He was diligent in every deed that he began in the service of God's temple, in the instruction and the commands, in order to seek his God, and he prospered. I want you to hear that again. He was diligent in every deed. Man, let that be true of us. Let's be men and women who are diligent in everything that we do for the Lord. He sought the Lord and he prospered. Let that be said of us as well. Let us be a people who seek after God, who desire God's heart and God's best and God's ways for our life. And Hezekiah prospered. Why did he prosper? Because he was aligning his life with the will and the work of God. Now, here's where the story begins to unfold. This is where the tension begins to build in Hezekiah's life and his ministry as the king. In chapter 32, it says, after Hezekiah's faithful deeds. Okay, so what's Hezekiah doing? He is being faithful to the Lord. King Sennacherib of Assyria came and entered Judah. He laid siege to the fortified cities and intended to break into them. Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come and that he planned war on Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem is that capital city of Judah. That's where Hezekiah would have been. And so now you have this king, Sennacherib of Assyria, who were a terrible people, right? They were a warmongering people. And they've got their eyes set on Judah. Like they want that land. They want those cities. And so they began to lay siege. And so I just want you to see this, that chapter 31 ends with Hezekiah prospering. Chapter 32 begins with Hezekiah challenged. Hezekiah has opposition coming his way. Can I tell you something? When you commit yourself to the Lord's will, you can expect opposition. I often say that when you find opposition in your life, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing something wrong. It could mean that you're doing something right. Often when we find ourselves living for God's kingdom, the kingdom of light, the kingdom of darkness begins to make war against us. And so we need to be prepared, and we need to not be surprised when that opposition comes. Listen, if you're doing God's work, don't be surprised if it's not easy. It may not be easy, but it will be worth it. And so I want you to see that here, Hezekiah, he has committed himself to the Lord. He is seeking after the Lord. He is prospering, but yet there's opposition. And I want you to see this at this moment in his life, this moment in the kingdom, that he is this close to defeat. But he's also this close to victory. And I think that's true for any one of us. As we are committing ourselves to follow the Lord, to do what God desires for our lives and for our families and for our church and for our community, all of us at any moment, we are this close to defeat. But the good news is we are also this close to victory. And so how did Hezekiah respond to the opposition? That's the question that I want to spend the next few minutes addressing with you. What did Hezekiah do when King Sennacherib and the Assyrians, who were a dreadful people, how did they respond to that opposition? I think they did two things. Number one, he leaned on his tribe. Number two, he leaned on the Lord. Let me repeat that. Number one, he leaned on his tribe. And number two, he leaned on the Lord. Let's talk about that. First, we see that Hezekiah leaned on his tribe. Let me continue reading, picking up in verse 3. And so after he hears that Sennacherib is coming to war against him, it says that Hezekiah consulted with his officials and his warriors about stopping up the water of the springs that were outside the city, and they helped him. And so what did he do? He brought his officials together, he brought the warriors together, and he consulted them. He brought a team together and said, hey guys, what do we need to do? And they recognized that, well, something practical that they could do was stop up the water that was flowing through the community. That if Sennacherib came in, they would not have a water source at their disposal. And so they were making this wise little move here. In verse 4, it says, many people gathered and stopped up all the springs and the stream that flowed through the land. And they said, why should the kings of Assyria come and find abundant water? Then Hezekiah strengthened his position. How did he strengthen his position? By rebuilding the entire broken down wall and heightening the towers and the other outside wall. He repaired the supporting terraces of the city of God and made an abundance of weapons and shields. So what did they do? They got ready. They got ready for war. And I just want you to see that Hezekiah did not do this alone. He did this within his community. He did this within his tribe. And there are three people that we see in Hezekiah's tribe: his officials, his warriors, and then there's this guy named Isaiah. More on him in just a second. First, we see that he consulted the officials. I think there were some wise people in Hezekiah's life, some people who had experience, some people who were no doubt older than Hezekiah, and so he consulted these officials. Number two, he rallied the warriors. He brought warriors together. These were the people who were willing to go fight and do battle with Hezekiah and for Hezekiah. And then he strengthened his position. There was a physical strengthening of the position by the fact that they were rebuilding the walls. They began to go to work building shields and swords to prepare for the battle that would one day come. In fact, we know from 2 Kings that Hezekiah actually sent word to Isaiah, the prophet of God, asking Isaiah, what should we do? And so through all of that, I just want you to see that Hezekiah did not face the opposition alone, but rather he leaned on his tribe. Hey, you and I, we desperately need a tribe. I talked about this a few weeks ago here on the Growing Forward podcast about our need for community. And this is a part of that. We need a tribe of people that we can lean on whenever we have opposition. I want to kind of hone in on that tribe a little bit, your tribe and my tribe. I think there are at least three kinds of people that we need in our tribe. I think we need wise counsel. Just like Hezekiah had these consultants or these wise counsel that he began to seek their wisdom, you and I need wise counsel in our tribe. This is the person who's a little older than us. Maybe they're more experienced than us. Someone who's been there and they've done that we can go and sit down and have a cup of coffee with. We can invite them over to dinner, and we could just ask them questions. And then we can close our mouth and we can listen to what they have to say. See, the wise counsel part of our tribe, it's not about us trying to impress. It's not the person that we're trying to, it's not our boss. It's not the person that we're trying to prove ourselves to. It's the person that we sit down with a closed mouth and open ears, ready to listen, because they have wisdom that we need in our life. This is the person, listen, if you're a newlywed, this is the couple who's been married for 20 years, for 40 years, for 50 years. If you have a new baby, this is the person who's raised teenagers and sent them out into the world. If you have teenagers, this is the person who has kids who are grown and who have time to sit down with you and tell you, listen, it's going to be okay. You're going to make it through. If you're in college, this is the person who's employed. If you're employed, maybe this is the person who's retired. This is just the person who may be one step ahead of us, 2 steps ahead of us, 5 steps ahead of us, that we can sit down and listen to the wisdom that the Lord has given them through the classroom of experience in life. We need wise counsel in our tribe. Number 2, we need warriors in our tribe. I think the warriors, like Hezekiah had warriors. He had people who were willing to go to battle. We need people who are willing and able to go to battle with us in times of opposition. These are our friends, the people who are in our close community that we can pray with, that we get encouragement from. These are the people that you can tell anything to, and they're not going to look at you with a shock face, but they're going to put their arm around you, and they're going to encourage you, they're going to pray with you, and they're going to walk with you through that season of life. This is the person that you can call on at any time. There's no time that's too late. There's no time that's too early. I like to say this is the person who has refrigerator rights, okay, in your home. This is the person, when you're in their home, you have refrigerator rights. You can open up the fridge without having to ask, because you're walking in a deep, committed relationship with these people. So we need wise people in our tribe. We need warriors or friends in our tribe. There's a third person I think we all need in our tribe, no matter who you are, and that is a pastor. We all need a pastor in our tribe. The biblical word for pastor is simply this word, shepherd. This is the person in our life that will help shepherd our hearts. This is not the person who just preaches at us, okay? But this is the person who's willing to sit down as well and look beyond the tips and tricks and the tactics and the strategies, but the person who's willing to sit down and ask, hey, how's your heart? How are you doing in this situation? This is the person who's able to help move you onto God's agenda. And I love the book, I think it's called Spiritual Leadership. And they define spiritual leadership as simply moving people onto God's agenda. That's the role of a pastor. That's the role of a shepherd. This may be the pastor of your church. This may be the shepherd of your small group. For Hezekiah, I think this was Isaiah. He reached out to Isaiah to call upon the Lord, to walk alongside him, because Hezekiah wanted to move toward God's agenda. This is the person in your life that will help strengthen your position. Hezekiah, it says that they strengthened their position. And they did that in very tangible ways, like rebuilding the wall and shields and spears. But we also need to strengthen the position of our heart. We need to strengthen the position of our soul. Listen, we need a tribe with wise counsel, with warriors, and with a shepherd or a pastor. And the time for you to build your tribe is not when the opposition comes. The time to build your tribe is right now, like before the opposition shows up. That's when we need our tribe. And so I just want you to see just how important and how critical it was for Hezekiah to have a tribe that he could lean on. The second thing that he did was he leaned on the Lord. He didn't just lean on others, and that's so important. We were made for one another. But more importantly, Hezekiah leaned on the Lord. Let me read just a few more verses. In verse 6, it says that he set military commanders over the people, and he gathered the people in the square of the city gate. Then he encouraged them. This is what the leader does. The leader in the room is the one who encourages others. And so Hezekiah, he's the leader. He's the king. And so he's calling all the people together in the town square, and he begins to encourage them, saying, be strong and courageous. And so he is calling them up. He's calling them to stand firm. He's calling them not to act out of fear because of the intimidation of King Sennacherib and the Assyrians. He says, be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid or discouraged before the king of Assyria or before that large army that is with him. Now notice what he does. He doesn't say, hey, that king over there, like they're nothing. He actually says like they're a large army. Okay, he recognizes that there is a fierce foe standing in the way. And by the way, you and I have to recognize that we have a fierce foe. For there are more with them than are with us. And he goes on to say, he has only human strength, but we have the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battle. So the people relied on the words of King Hezekiah of Judah. He says, look, they have strength, right? We can't discount that. Let's acknowledge that. Our foe is a real foe. Our enemy is a real enemy. He's a strong enemy. They have strength, but they only have human strength. And how does Hezekiah encourage the people? He says, we have the Lord our God not just to help us, but to actually fight on our behalf. And so I want you to see how Hezekiah encourages the people. I want you to see how he leans on the Lord. He encourages the people, and the source of that encouragement is our enemy only has human strength, but we have God to fight our battles. Now, from that moment, the battle starts. Man, things get intense. King Sennacherib comes, and he actually besieges this little city called Lachish. Lachish is about a few miles just to the southwest of Jerusalem, and Sennacherib starts to taunt the people in Jerusalem. He starts to intimidate the people in Jerusalem, and he starts to try to discourage them. He mocks them. He laughs at them, and he sends this question: are you relying on your God? You see, Sennacherib, he had a lot of victories in his past. There were a lot of battles in his history that he won. And now he's looking at this little city called Jerusalem with this little people who are on the inside. And he's saying, look, are you really going to rely on your God? And I want you to see kind of how this story draws to a close. I'm going to pick up in verse 20. King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amos, prayed about this, and they cried out to heaven. What did they do? How did they respond? They didn't panic. They didn't strategize. They didn't lay out the map and figure out how they were going to defeat the enemy in their human strength. What did they do? They relied on God's strength. They prayed to the Lord. They cried out to heaven, and the Lord sent an angel who annihilated every valiant warrior, leader, and commander in the camp of the king of Assyria. And so the king of Assyria, that same king who was taunting, who was mocking, who was laughing at the people of God, it says that he returned in disgrace to his land. He went to the temple of his God, and there some of his own children were struck down with the sword. Listen, this is a small little story tucked away in the Old Testament. Doesn't get a lot of press like Moses parting the Red Sea. Doesn't get a lot of press like Daniel in the lion's den or David and Goliath. But man, the message there is still the same. There's this people of God who have a very real enemy and a very real foe who has one simple tactic, and that tactic is intimidation. And what do? Hezekiah relied on his tribe. They came together as one, and they relied on the Lord. They leaned on the Lord in every situation. Hey, we are kind of wrapping up this Be Still series at Antioch, where we've kind of been learning. There are moments in our life where we have to do our part. We need to rebuild the walls. We need to prepare. We need to encourage one another. But there are moments in our life when we simply need to be still and know that He is God. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, the very own Apostle Paul, who's known for kind of helping lay the foundation of the church. We have half the New Testament is humanly authored by him. And yet he cries out to God because there's this thorn in his side. And he prays and he leans on the Lord. He asks not once, not twice, but 3 times for the Lord to remove this thorn. And here's what it says. He says, concerning this, he pleaded with the Lord 3 times that this thorn would leave him. But the Lord said to Paul, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Maybe you've heard that phrase. Maybe it's new to you. But God is still speaking that message over us today, that His grace is sufficient. It's not insufficient. When you put your faith in the ATM of God's grace, listen, there are sufficient funds. His grace is enough, and His power is perfected in our weakness. Paul would go on to say, therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may reside in me. Hey, does Christ's power reside in you? Let that be true of us. Let us be a people who lean on our tribe, but also let us be people who lean on the Lord. And may God's grace be enough for this moment, for this battle, for this opposition, for this point in time. And may Christ's power reside within us. Hey, thank you for tuning in today. I pray this message has been an encouragement to you. If it has, hey, please give it a like or share so that others can hear this message as well. Let us know in the comment maybe how it blesses you or encourage you. Until next time, I hope you will keep growing forward.